All right. Well, let's get this show on the road. My name is Rob Humbracht. I have been an educator, not a healthcare educator, but an educator for 22 years, and have been running ReelDx for about a year. During the pandemic, I was actually using ReelDx cases to teach pre-health students stuck at home who needed clinical hours. That was how I became involved and became so excited about what ReelDx offers, and I've just been loving it ever since. Also with me is Ted Ted Lee. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ted Lee. I'm a program director for emergency medical sciences here at Missouri Southern State University. I've been a program director for an accredited EMS program for over 20 years. I've been an EMS provider for over 25 years. And it's been my pleasure to be using the ReelDx program for about 4 years now.
Nice. Well, and so then the agenda for today, we're going to keep this direct. We're going to start by talking about what are the learner challenges. The goal here is for you all to share what you're seeing among the challenges that your students are facing these days. And then from that, we'll talk about the role that real patient video cases can play in helping overcome some of those challenges. We'll also talk about how to use them specifically in your program, the pros and cons, the alternatives. Then we'll have a specific, the case study will be integrated. I really want Ted to chime in at every point here because he's actually on the ground using this day in and day out. And I wanted to get his take on what he sees from using it so that you guys come away from today, not just with an idea of wouldn't it be nice, but hey, here are the next steps that you can take for using real patient video cases. And then the conclusion, we'll have time for Q&A. We'll also take some questions along the way. So I love that the chat is already so active. All right, you all are specifically invited at the end of today, to a free trial of the platform ReelDx. We have over 800 real patient video cases. We'll be showing one or so of those today, so you can get a sense for what they're like and how you might want to use those with your students. But so at the end of today, there will be a link, and maybe my colleague Lisa can pop the link into the chat here, so you guys can fill this out if you would like a free trial. All right, so let's get things started here. I just wanted to know from your perspective, please put into the chat, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing students face? These might be traditional challenges that all of your students have faced from the dawn of time. They might be newer challenges kind of post-COVID or in the environment that we're in. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing? All right, Sean says getting into clinicals. Vincent says adapting from the class to the street. Steven says time management. Yeah, call volume. That's a good one. Issues studying. Okay. Peds contacts. I'm assuming, Teresa, that's getting exposure to pediatrics cases. Yeah, Deanne says not enough clinical sites. Putting it all together. Lack of soft skills. All right. Cookbook medicine. I like it. Lack of context clues. This is great. This is great. So nuanced. So many of you guys are saying some of the similar things. This is terrific. Ted, when you see this list go by, what resonates with you?
Well, it's kind of the same across the board. It doesn't matter if you're a big program or a small program, if you're urban or if you're rural. Patient contacts is always a big deal. The ability for students to take the foundational work from the classroom and implement it into a field environment. And I always mention things like, the versus the chaos of the field versus the control of the classroom, and how to marry those two things together and put students in a really good position to really maximize the most out of their clinical and internship experiences.
I love it. Chaos of the field versus the control of the classroom. I'm actually writing that down. I think that's so great. Yeah, prior to today, I've had these conversations with a bunch of educators, and I wanted to, just the ones I hear the most often are clinical readiness, burnout, and then kind of learner expectations. They somehow expect that this will be easy when it's not. All right. Well, so real patient video cases are obviously not a panacea. It's not going to all of a sudden make all these challenges go away. But I obviously believe in them. I think what they can do is significantly improve the learning experience with these challenges. So as we're thinking about the reasons to use it, I think the first one is it feels real. It is the closest thing to real life outside of actual real life. And so I've seen that the light bulbs go on in the learner's eyes when they see a real patient case, and that is obviously incredibly beneficial for connecting their learning to what they'll be doing. But it's the closest thing you can get to being real. Other reasons would be you can have a standard case list, so you can actually see the cases that matter to your curriculum before students see real patients. So it can help with making sure they get the right exposure to the right conditions and presentations in a way that it's hard to do if you just hope that the ride-along will provide the right cases that day. Assessment would be another one. You can assess whether the learning has sunk in from class. A lot of times in group settings, individual learners might sneak by with not mastering the material. You also have access with real patient videos. You might be able to see populations or presentations that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see easily. Students love the flexibility. They can learn on their schedule from any device. And then, those are some of the possible reasons to use real patient video cases. Ted, what resonates with you from this list or from something that I didn't mention?
Really for me in our program and how we've been developing this, this is not a replacement for anything. This is specifically focused in real world applications, and it's addition to what is already happening in the programs. So as you evaluate your programs, as our accrediting bodies require us to look at, where we might be deficient or where we're having issues, this can be plugged in perfectly to help fit some of the needs that the individual programs have. And through the list, there's a COAMPS library of different topics that you would be looking for. And it's very easy to search, very specific things like pediatrics or OB or things that students might have problems getting. This is a way to be very consistent across the board, where you ensure that student A all the way to student Z is having a very similar experience. Because we know when we go out in the field, we have no idea what we're going to see, and a student can spend 2 or 3 shifts out and really not see anything of substance that would help them along the way. So again, this is the chaos of the field versus the control of the classroom, and really being consistent for our students.
Nice. Yeah, and so maybe what would help would be if we actually showed a real patient case. So 661 was the one that you wanted to walk through, right, Ted? Let me pull that up on the platform. So one more time, sharing screen. This ought to work. All right. So this is what it looks like when you log into ReelDx, and when you guys get access for the free trial, you'll have access to all of the cases. So the numbers go up to 1,072. There's about 800, and I'd say about 300 of them are emergency medicine based. One of our co-founders is an emergency pediatric physician, and so he's captured a lot of the cases himself. And then you can filter by anything that you want, including area of study. So for example, here's the COAM curriculum. So if you're just looking for the cases that involve chest pain, you can do that, or stroke or overdose or whatever. There's a couple of overdose ones. But the one that we're going to cover today is case 661. And so when you get to the video, you can actually hear the sound. I'm going to play this and make this big screen.
So what's going on today? Why'd you give them a call originally?
So ever since I had a TIA on November 6th last year, and ever since then I've been getting slowly worse at being able to maintain my coherence, I guess, on the road. it's slipping away, and I almost crashed my car 3 times on the way over here.
Okay.
I found myself almost ditching it.
Just kind of losing consciousness, kind of?
Yes, actually I ran up on somebody's lawn today.
Okay. Any drugs or alcohol?
No.
No?
None.
Okay. Have you fallen down in the last week or anything? Hit your head? Nothing like that? Are you diabetic? Do you have blood sugar problems?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. How about right now? Are you in any pain right now?
I have a hernia. Yeah, I'm in pain.
Okay.
I've been in pain.
But that's old stuff. That's nothing new.
Well, no, it's kind of new. But I mean, I had to walk 10 miles yesterday. And
Okay.
It really hurts.
What hospital do you normally go to?
Meridian Park.
Okay. Standard questions. Any chest pain right now?
No.
Any difficulty breathing?
No.
Feeling nauseous or sick to your stomach?
No.
Dizzy at all?
No.
No. Okay.
Just
Very
tired.
good.
I mean, I just can't stay awake
Okay.
when I'm driving, and it scares the hell out of me.
What kind of medications are you taking? Not yet.
Levothyroxine, aspirin, metoprolol, 50 in the morning, 25 at night. Omeprazole.
Okay.
Were you walking this
Vitamin
morning?
B. Yeah.
I saw you walking down the side of the overpass this morning with a gas can in your
Yeah, I ran out of gas last night at 11:30,
Oh, wow.
and I went and woke up all the neighbors and pissed them off because
Go ahead.
it was a Lincoln Continental and I couldn't push it. I ran out of gas right out in front of Forrest's house.
Yeah.
I didn't come back to his house, but I knocked on the neighbor's house up front and they didn't answer, so I went to 3 other houses
Dude on the way there.
and pissed everybody off. You know, but at least I got my Lincoln off the road. I was afraid
Rig would be fine.
the people
He's not
sitting
complaining of
down the
any
road, I was
cardiac
afraid someone was
stuff.
going to hit it. It's too early to. It was.
All right. And so typically the videos are about 2 minutes long. You know, any longer than that, and I find that students' focus can kind of fade. But I want to turn it over to Ted. Ted, when you are teaching this case or using this case, what are some of the ways that you use it?
Well, we look at using ReelDx in a lot of ways, and we were using this pre-COVID, and we were trying to tuck it into our standard classroom and our simulation aspects. And then, just like everybody else, you know, we were pretty much kicked out of the hospitals and EMS services shut down for students when COVID happened, and we were like, okay, well, we still need patient contacts. We still need students to be looking at patients. So then we started, you know, this whole process of discussion group assignments or assignments for pre-classroom work, so that when they came in, they'd seen a patient, they have this patient in their mind, and then walking through the process as it relates to the content that you're going over for the day. In our EMT classes or advanced EMT classes where we're just introducing EMS to them or an advanced level to the student, we use this in a kind of a guided classroom. We'll bring up the video and we'll walk through. And then we start with, you know, protocol step by step. What are your treatment options? You know, what do you think is going on? Diagnosis, differential diagnosis, and really have the students start this critical thinking aspect of, well, what would I choose to do when, based on what I'm seeing? And, you know, the 2 minutes or the 3 minute length in this is pretty perfect in that you can kind of stop and start and say, okay, you walk in, this is what you see. The pre-video, other than like the online discussions that we use in our online learning platform, so they have weekly assignments and student or patients that they have to see. We also use it as a pre-video for things like task trainers and for simulation, so that when they first walk in, okay, this is the patient that you're seeing, and then we move over to the simulators or to the task trainers, and then they have to work through the process based off of the information that they received from the video clip.
Wow. We'll break some of these different use cases down in a little bit more detail, just to show folks, like with this case, like if you're going to walk through this case, how do you interact with the drawers that are below the case, Ted? Like, what do you use? What do you to draw this stuff out?
Well, for the first runs, of course, we don't really want the students to be looking at the drawers at all, because we don't want to give them clues. We don't want them to click on something and then start getting information to where it would be inorganic. It wouldn't be a natural progress for them to go. And as we're walking through the classrooms, in the classroom session, we'll make them ask for this. Okay, this is what I would want now. And then we would start giving them the information in real time like they would have to. I remember way back in the day, we were using task trainers or, just heads or anti-resuscitation. And we'd turn around and we'd get kind of a garden hose of information at one time, but it wasn't real. We didn't have to go through the process of, oh, I want to hook them up to the monitor so I can see what their EKG is. I want to get my first set of vitals, and these are the vital signs that I want. So we want them to work for it a little bit and not just get the information. As we continue on, or as we have these critical thinking exercises, as they're working through the process and say, okay, this is what I think is going on, then we start opening up the drawers and say, okay, this is how this patient presented. Has your decision tree changed at all? Would you do anything different? Are you looking at this patient any differently based off of this real world information that we're starting to get?
Yeah, nice. So each of the cases comes with a lot of information that, like Ted says, can give it away if you just let them have access to it. But you can actually lock these drawers so that then they're forced to think through the case before they get the answers. You can see the diagnosis here is nothing too crazy. Under the outcomes, we will also have supporting materials for the case. So in this case, you can see the 12 lead and you can see some of the other information. Sometimes there's additional videos down here. And then there's a standards of care with links to, this one goes to EMS World and some places that are peer reviewed. And then each case has also been peer reviewed by a physician to make sure that kind of the key takeaways for learners. So, all right, so this is what a patient case looks like. Let's, now that we've sort of seen a typical case, let's talk about possible ways to use it. And I have created a little bit of a comprehensive list here, some of which Ted has already started walking through. So let me get my presentation back online here. All right, and all right. Share, that should be all set. So here are the possible uses of this, of these patient video cases. I think the first is the way that ReelDx was used before the pandemic hit, which is it makes lectures come alive. So in a student's brain, there's just a very big disconnect between what it is that they're learning, why they're learning it, how it'll apply in the field. And so when you pair that with a case, either, like during lecture, it feels more real. So maybe the most, I think that's the obvious one. I think the second one would be using problem-based learning to work through a case. So Ted, when you assign these to students, do you have them work through it on their own or do you pair them up into groups?
Usually we use this in an online learning platform as a discussion group. So they have to watch the video and they have either a series of questions that we have for them to answer, and they can't see anybody else's answers before they post. So they post their responses to it, and then it opens up the chat or the discussion group for them, and then they can see everybody else's. And as part of those exercises, they're required, one, I have to post my own, but then I also have to respond to a fellow student about their post as well. And what we see is there, some people will focus, I think this is a respiratory issue. I think this is a cardiovascular issue. And then they start talking back and forth about, why they felt one way or another based off of, the information that they obtained. And we bring it back into the classroom as well. For us, they have a week to do these things. So by Wednesday, they have to turn in their initial discussion. And then by Sunday, they have to have an answer discussion to another student. And then that following week, we bring these up in class and talk about discussions that happened in the group. And sometimes those discussions are pretty, standard. Everybody was pretty much on point. Everybody saw the same thing. Everybody felt the same way about the case. But anytime that there was a difference of opinion or a concern, it facilitated a more in-depth conversation with it. And for us too, when you have a student out in clinic or you have a student out in internship, they talk about experiences that they've had or patients that they've seen, but we don't always have a great picture because we weren't out there with them. So we're kind of unsure about what they're talking about or what they're trying to bring. But when they're talking about these, we know exactly what they're talking about. We've seen the videos, we know the cases. So it's a more pointed and a more directed conversation where everybody's kind of on the same sheet of music, and the discussion just seems to be a little bit more useful.
Awesome. So then the third possible use case is to pair with simulation lab or other scenarios. I've been blown away by the extent to which some of our nursing learners, EMS learners, they will put this on a big video screen, use the video to set the stage, and then give students specific tasks to perform in context of the case itself. Ted, when you guys do that stuff in class, how does that work with the things you then ask students to do?
Yeah, we have the same kind of mentality with that. Our simulation area, we have 2 ambulance simulators inside the classroom, and on the walls we have two computer screens or TV screens that we run the computers through. So the students have the ability to walk in and then we start the video. This is what you're walking into. This is the environment. And then they start the process of seeing, okay, this is what my priorities are and this is how I'd be working through it. And then we stop the video, and the 2 minutes, that's the initial on scene. Okay, that's great. And then we either move to a simulator that's either on the floor or in a chair, or they move right into the back of the ambulance simulators that we have. And then they start working on the trainers that we have. So we have an OB one and we have a human simulator that's a high fidelity. So one or the other, they tend to work on those. At the EMT level or at the advanced EMT level, it's a little bit harder to get them fully up to speed with, really in-depth scenarios until the very end. So a lot of times they'll see those videos and then we'll go right into the task training of, okay, this is the skill that we want you to perform based off of what you saw on the video. You'd be working through the process.
Nice. Yeah. Well, it sounds like if you have access to those that level of simulation equipment, that's an ideal use case. I don't know that you absolutely have to have that to try to get that realism out of it, but certainly nice when you have the tools. So the fourth use here would be to assign as pre-work so that the lecture feels more relevant. Ted obviously talked about how he does that with his students in the group online LMS. You can also assign students these cases through the ReelDx platform or however. And what I would say about this that's critical is don't just give them a case to review. Make sure that they have a specific purpose for the learning. Otherwise, it can feel a little unfocused. And then the fifth use case would be to assign as homework to reinforce the learning from lecture. So I don't think you've mentioned that, Ted. Do you guys do any assigning of cases after the lecture, after the simulation, or is it just in advance?
With our lower level providers, our EMT and our advanced EMT, we tend to have this, if it's either guided through the class or once they do the lecture component, the video is brought up as kind of a review or a culmination of the lecture that they went through, so that they see, okay, we just talked about the foundational work of what we're doing, and then to see it kind of in a practical application and then talk through the process. We haven't really had it to where we've assigned it for homework, just because we're trying to make sure that we have accountability of the students, and we don't want to dilute the number of cases that we have to where they're going to see them multiple times. We would like them to be, a little bit more of a controlled setting.
Yeah, that makes sense. The final possible use case that I've heard of from folks that used our platform is exam preparation. It seems like across all healthcare verticals, and certainly EMS is no outlier here, that we're moving toward a situation where students are asked to answer real world cases in their exams that they're taking. And so this is how you measure clinical competencies. And so a great way to prepare for that is to use actual video cases. I guess, Ted, do you have any resources that you have for students who are preparing for their exams? Any guidance on maybe the use of the patients in that case?
Well, as we get through, of course, like I mentioned, our EMT and our advanced EMT, those are 1 semester long, 16 weeks. So to use this in the very beginning at times can be difficult for them because it's a little bit too much. They haven't been out in the field yet. They haven't done some of the skills. So they just kind of get lost in the mix. So we're using it towards the end. In the paramedic, as they start learning more and then they start going into the lab component or the clinical component, and then we start rolling these out, they start seeing more patients. And then coming to the very end, getting ready for what currently is a national registry standard of the out-of-hospital scenarios, we start using those and those components to where, okay, this is the case that you would be going through during that out-of-hospital scenario. And the library cases that you have and you're able to look at it, you know, we can make sure that across the board, and these are becoming accreditation standards, where you're making sure that the students are seeing cases of very specific types. And this really helps with that, to be able to ensure that at the end of the program, yes, I know that they've gone through this many, as well as their patient contacts in real life.
Nice. Ted, looks like we have a question in the chat here. As for students that learn better from a practical aspect, have you found the PVCs to be helpful?
Again, this is, you know, everybody's a different learner. We have students that will sit and lecture and they won't take notes and they'll listen and that's all they need. And then we have our hands-on students that the lecture is where they struggle the most. They have really hard time with foundational work until you put something into their hands. I remember when I was going through paramedic school and they would say, okay, pretend your patient looks like this. And I'm like, I can't pretend that because I don't know what I'm looking at and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to know. This really does kind of solidify that for the students when they start looking at stuff or they start hearing about things. Okay, your patient may be presenting like this. And then you give them a case with a patient that is very similar to those presentations. Those light bulb moments really start going off for them, and they start to really start to hone in to go, okay, I'm understanding this. I have not only what I'm hearing in lecture, I'm seeing stuff out in the field, but I'm there very pointed with assigning cases that are going along with classroom work so that they get that real world application as quickly as possible.
Excellent. I think, well, looks like there's a hand raised. Don, did you want to chat with us? Feel free to pop a question into the chat. You guys can, there's 2 places to put questions. There's the question and answer, and then there's also the chat. And I don't know that I can bring you on microphone to ask that question. That would be delightful, but my question to you all is, do you use videos at all in the classroom right now? And if so, what has been the impact of using those videos? Yeah, sounds like Bo says outstanding. Stephen has not yet. Never had it, says Cameron. Okay. Starting to use VR as well. Okay, interesting. Okay, use them to hold conversations. That makes sense, Nathan. Yeah. Sometimes the videos are too lengthy. I agree. that you have to be very careful to make sure that you drive the point of what you want. Ted, maybe as a way of concluding this slide, what's the feedback that you get from students in general about having to work with these cases?
I can tell you from students' interactions, and they're kind of amazed by it, especially if they come from a program for their EMT or their advanced EMT somewhere else before they see us. It's kind of a night and day. They're like, wow, we never had anything like this. I can say that during the COVID time and just after COVID, when we really started ramping out these assignments, we had students that were, of course, going through the assignments while they were at work or while they were on internship. And the fellow preceptors or field providers that were watching them do that, they were blown away by it. They were like, wow, I wish we had this kind of stuff when I was in school. It would have been so much easier for us to understand some of the, components of seeing live patients earlier. We've had nothing but, really great impact statements from our students about how it's helped them. So, but, everything is a bell curve with our students. Some will be high performers, some are middle of the road, some are low performers. We tend to see, the greatest responses from some of our low performers or middle of the road performers. High performers are going to do well anywhere. And they're the ones that usually have really good study skills and they're academically sound. But I think this really is an opportunity to move the ones that might be struggling with, traditional education of sitting in a classroom, because, we didn't get into this profession to sit in a classroom. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to be out in the field. We wanted to be hands-on. We wanted to be doing things. And we have to try to work with their type of learning and how to get them successful. And I think this is a wonderful tool for that. Perfect.
So let me hopefully further inspire you all on the kinds of questions that you can ask of these patient video cases. As a bit of an aside, when I took over at ReelDx, it was described as the Netflix of patient-provider interactions, meaning we had this really wonderful library of cases, but there's not a lot of learning built in. And so what I've been doing over the past year or so has been working with veteran educators, veteran EMS educators, veteran other educators to try to develop try to make these cases more assignable out of the box. That was the #1 request that we got during COVID and after COVID, is they want to be able to assign something to students and not have to go through and review all 800 cases to figure out which ones to do that. So the questions that I'm about to show you are from somebody who's been teaching EMS for 20 years. Her name is Twink Dalton. She's delightful. Here are the questions that she's developed for one of our cases, which is case 1024, which is she's developing these at the BLS level. So you can see, so based on the chief complaint, what body systems are affected in this patient? Is this patient sick or not sick, and why? What is the pattern identified in the patient's chief complaint? And says a complete physical assessment should be performed on all patients. However, in this case, are there any specific assessments that when completed would contribute to BLS treatment decisions? So if you are teaching from this, here are your discussion points, right? You can, after the video, you can lead a classroom discussion on each of these topics. We're also building these out in multiple choice formats so that students can work through these questions in advance of a lecture. They can get instant feedback on what's right and what's wrong, and so they can start to get a sense for whether they are understanding the material appropriately. Here's some, or what additional tasks does your paramedic partner need you to complete? Here's some questions for the ALS level. So obviously a next level of difficulty. This is case 583. Select 3 of the most likely field impressions for this patient. So there are 3 right answers here that we've deemed right. And if the student gets it right or wrong, it'll pop up and show the feedback for that. You can ask, what actions can you take to narrow down your differential diagnosis? Which of your assessments will be the most significant in determining a working field impression and subsequent treatment? So depending on kind of where your learners are at, you can adjust the difficulty of the questions to match the reality of the case, right? I know you all are familiar with the idea of cognitive load. The basic idea there is you want it to be the Goldilocks level, not too high, not too low, just right. And if you are too low, it's boring. If you're too high, they lose interest, they can't continue. But what you're trying to aim for is that just right level. And so one thing that's been just really fun of my job has been hearing stories of how people are using these cases, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And so we're trying to codify that in some of the things that we're rolling out to our users. So I wanted to talk about two other types of resources that are similar to these patient video cases, but that you have to use with some caution. The first type would be unvetted content, which would be YouTube. Does anybody see some downsides with using random YouTube videos for teaching real patient cases? Maybe Ted, I'll ask you that question as people are chiming in.
Well, a few things, and anytime and we do this you're looking for videos for skills and things like that. Sometimes, they haven't been vetted very well, and the process that they're going through, it's not sound medicine, or, they make mistakes. And we have to be very careful about showing students mistakes very early on in the process, because then it gets stuck in the back of their head and they just keep kind of doing it. And then you have to get them to unlearn the mistake that we just created for them. So it takes a lot of background time and effort to look through something, and then to be able to go through the entire video clip that you're looking, or the skill session that you're looking for, and go, okay, yes, this is good, we can use this, versus I don't know, this is kind of troublesome. And in the chat, there was a comment about, videos were too long, or maybe you had to find clips or pieces of it. And that's just really labor intensive when you don't have somebody on the front end, vetting the medicine behind the video.
Yeah. On the one hand, right, the messiness of reality is part of what makes them good case studies. On the other hand, you have to be very careful that that what you're showing is the right way. So I think I'm seeing some good comments, like Robin says, she previews them before using them, she, I should say. That makes a lot of sense. So so that's one thing that I think to use with caution. The second thing to use with caution would be animated patients. These are, you can see the future where these patients really are dynamite. That for me, when I see these animated patients, and I go to a lot of different conferences where these tools are on offer, they just feel too gamified. They don't feel like it's a real, genuine, authentic interaction. Ted, do you have any experience with the use of animated encounters?
We're starting to get into the realm of VR, but just like with ReelDx or any other program that we're trying to bring in, it's not to replace anything. It's to increase the number of contacts and experiences in the labs and make them a little bit more meaningful. They definitely have their place and their role, I think, but sometimes the like you mentioned, the gameness of it, it wears on students the longer that they're in it. If it's not really real life stuff and it's just kind of point and click, some students, they'll become distracted or they won't engage with it as much versus kind of a real life. But like I said, everything has its place, simulation, task trainers, virtual reality, real patient cases. It's how you use them and what you're trying to do, with them. So again, anything with a group of patients or students rather, some will gravitate towards it, some won't. Some will use it to its best ability, some won't. But the game environment at times does seem like if they're just looking at something and then picking off of a menu, that's good for really early on education. But when they're trying to run scenarios and trying to critically think through process, it might not be as valuable.
Yeah, we're getting some really terrific comments in the chat here. I know everybody can see it. I just want to highlight this for the recording. So I'm going to start with the ones that are down here. So animated patients are a little different than VR. The animated patient programs I'm thinking about are the ones where they're training you to interact with a machine, essentially. VR is very different and has a wide range of applications. And so Bo is chiming in saying it's great for firefighter training, hazmat, and other homeland security drills. Yeah, like where else are you going to get access to those kinds of training programs? I think that makes a lot of sense. And then Robin chimed in to say that simulation is phenomenal, but not all that interested in animation. And then Shannon, thank you for chiming in, said that the experience with ReelDx video has been good. You used it as a session before class. You mark certain stop-start points so you can generate a discussion at various points. That's really good feedback for me. Like doing it in small groups, prefer to do it over Zoom even, and you separate students into breakout rooms. That's cool. Play part of a video, pose a question, have them go to the breakout room with their group and come back once the time is up and share. I think that's terrific. All right, so just to kind of get through a few other points today. So I wanted to show you guys the way that at least I've been thinking about the future of digital learning. I learned from a lot of companies like 2U and some of the kind of more general LMS systems. So in general, digital tools should be have the ability to be used asynchronously, and they need to be aligned with national curricula. In general, students don't have a lot of large chunks of time. They have a lot of what's been called time confetti, 10 to 15 minutes here or there. That's how they prefer to do their learning. Any less than that and it doesn't stick, any more than that, and a lot of times they get interrupted or it doesn't fit well into their lives. For these digital tools, they generally like to see assessments with instant feedback, and then they want to know that what they're doing matters toward their the learning pathway that they're on, their career, their certifications, et cetera. And so we are actively working on all of these inside of ReelDx. One of the big things that we're launching is assessments. This is coming live in about 2 weeks, which we're finally excited about. And it's nothing crazy. It's just some multiple choice and self-learning questions. We're working with ReelDx faculty members. These are folks that love using the platform and sort of give us this idea of here is how we use it in our institution. And so they are helping us to build these assessments that'll be ready right out of the box. We are also working with CAPC for accreditation for continuing education. We haven't even talked about using ReelDx for that, but we think that, obviously we're a little biased, but we think that using real patient cases for continuing education is an incredibly sensible way of getting that continuing education. And of course, coming soon will be our faculty created courses and questions. We are working directly with several faculty members to build their own courses so that the cases they want to use and the questions that they want to ask are already built into the platform. Along with assessments, we're launching a course catalog. So the series for EMS is going to be critical thinking for EMTs, critical thinking for paramedics. The idea is to take a real patient video case to ask questions that force students to think about what they would do next, and to actually make that be able to be assigned, again, either before class, after class, however they want to do it, however you want to do it as educators. So it'll be out of the box. We are mapping this to the COAM curriculum, and then we're creating these multiple choice assessments with our veteran instructors. So just as a reminder, you guys are cordially invited to a free trial of ReelDx. Lisa, if you would drop that in the chat one more time, that'd be great. I also wanted to make sure that you all had my contact information in case you have any direct questions. It's just my first and last name, first.lastname@realdx.com, and that's my phone number. And we have about 10, 15 minutes left. I would love to answer any additional questions that you guys have. Again, like I like to tell my students, the only dumb questions are the ones you don't ask. So please fire away into the chat. What questions do you have about anything that we've covered today, or questions for me or for Ted? Yeah, Bo asked the question about anything for firefighters, not explicitly for firefighters. You know, I get a lot of questions like this. Wouldn't it be great if you had dentistry or veterinary medicine or whatever. But we don't have any specific firefighter training drills. If you're interested in working with us to capture some firefighter training for the platform, please drop me a line. We are always interested in creating more cases, and specifically more cases that will fit the needs that you have at your institution. So please drop me a line if you're interested, Bo. I would love to work with you. So Patricia asked about the cost after the free trial. We try to keep the cost of the platform pretty reasonable. So it's $69 per student per year is our cost for using ReelDx. With students, at least, that's the student cost. You can either charge students directly or your institution can cover that. If you are interested in getting a more clear breakdown of how much it would cost for your program, again, I hope you will fill out that form. We'd be happy to chat with you guys. Let's see, Sarah asked the question, can this be adapted for the EMR level? Ted, that's a little bit beyond my specific level of knowledge. Do you do anything that's at the EMR level with ReelDx?
We currently do not have emergency medical response for our classroom, but because it can be adapted, I mean, this is kind of like an ICS or NAEMSE type thing. It can be contracted or expanded as you see fit. And then the instructor can use these, however is best tucked into their teaching style and their curriculum. So it really is, up to the individual instructor on how much or how little they choose to use this platform, but it could definitely be used for any medical provider.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of cases that you could use for specific purposes. Let me see if I can share my screen one more time, and I'll give you a sense here. So on our platform, there's a lot of ride-along cases, but there's a gentleman that's an overdose patient that I think is a particularly good one for an emergency medical response. Starts with the ambulance. They arrive, and there's a gentleman lying face up in a field.
Got a false pinpoint pierce.
Eventually, they get him up and talking again.
Lay down.
And responsive.
You were just overdosed on heroin, but you need a second. Okay.
So you probably could build questions around that on the EMR level, but yeah, I think it would take a little bit of extra work on your end, Sarah. And if you are interested in that, I could probably connect you with somebody that is using it in that capacity, and then you guys could compare notes. All right, cost we've talked about. Let's see. Samantha asked if ReelDx can be used by inpatient nursing staff. Definitely. Our biggest users are PAs, NPs, and of course EMS personnel. So it's pretty flexible. It depends on what kinds of cases you're hoping to see. We obviously are very well represented in the emergency space. Don't have very many in the OB-GYN space. There's no deaths or dying on the platform for obvious reasons of consent. All of our patients are HIPAA certified, and so it can be very difficult to get those kinds of cases. Also, psychiatry cases are a little tricky. Anybody with an altered mental status needs to have clear consent or from a close family member, and that can be a little tricky as well. There's a question for you, Ted, let's see. This is what percentage of the EMS videos are patient refusals? So if a patient refuses, we don't publish the video. I think that's what you're asking, Cameron. And in general, it's pretty high. It's about 60 to 80% say yes. I mean, basically they are okay with using their suffering for educational purposes. Sometimes they don't want to be shown in a certain kind of compromising context. It's totally up to them, but everything is HIPAA compliant. Teresa asked, Ted, have you counted clinical hours using this?
I've added a response in the chat. As a rule, no, we don't. We try to exhaust all means of getting the students out into clinic and internship, but there's always the case of they need one more student or one more patient experience or one more demographic. Through COAMPS, we're allowed to do simulation in those areas, and we do use this as part of the simulation that we're running to make it more real world. But those are very limited cases, you know, 1s and 2s. We try to exhaust every means possible of getting them out into the field and getting them out in their clinical settings to where they'll see as many patients as possible. Of course, you know, we have our programs across the United States, and in some areas, it is really hard to get patient contacts. So as you're developing your programs, you may have to, you know, you're trying to get real unique about, you know, how can we meet these objectives? We do have some flexibility in our accreditation to allow for things like simulation, and this would be something that I believe would be appropriate. Can't replace everything with it, but you know, the 1s and 2 cases where you're trying to make up the difference, I think this is a very useful tool.
Yeah, the CAPC folks have given us some really wonderful feedback and are bullish about the approval process for continuing education. So we have had to develop these assessments in order to measure whether the learner has gotten out of the case what they're supposed to. So that's part of the reason that we've been going through this process. And so we're really excited to work with them on that. All right, any other questions for today? You guys have been very active in the chat. I really appreciate that. It's made presenting much more fun. Thank you for that. Well, then I would like to thank not only you all for coming, but I would like to thank Rio and NAEMSE for hosting this. And then I'd really like to thank Ted for his time. Ted, it's been so valuable. Thank you for all that you've brought to today. Thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity, and you know, anything that I can do to help, I'm here for you. I'm in the trenches just like everybody else here, trying to figure out a best way to take care of our students and get them ready for the field.
Thank you so much, Rob and Ted. We greatly appreciate that you came and spoke with everybody today. We greatly appreciate our partnership with ReelDx, and we are so glad that we could give you guys this platform today to reach some of our members. Everybody, please don't worry if you missed any links or any important information today. This will all go out to you in tomorrow's follow-up email, which goes out 24 hours after the start of the webinar. So please do not worry. I will make sure you get all of that. I also dropped the link to register for the CEU credit for this webinar, so you can grab that as well. But other than that, I will make sure that Rob's contact information goes out in the email as well. So again, thank you both so much for being here and presenting with us today, and thank you everybody for joining. And we will see you all next time. All right, have a good afternoon, everyone.